I was face down in wet red clay, beside my own lake, with my wrists pinned behind me, while 3 deputies yelled like I'd just robbed a bank, and the HOA president stood 10 feet away, filming it on her phone, with this little satisfied smile. The sheriff kept asking, "Where's the weapon?" And she kept insisting, "He threatened families. He's dangerous. He's been stealing from the community, like saying it enough times would make it true." And the whole time I'm staring at my fishing rod lying in the mud like it's evidence in a murder case, thinking, yeah, that happened. And the craziest part is, she had no idea my cameras had already caught her people trespassing, cutting my chain, and putting up an HOA gate on land they didn't own. My name's Miles Bennett. I weld for a living. I'm not a dramatic guy. I'm not even a loud guy. I'm the kind of man who bought a place outside Copperfield, Georgia, because I wanted quiet. Not neighbors, not meetings, not rules about what shade of beige my mailbox should be. Just quiet. And I got it for a while. There's an 8-acre spring-fed lake on my property tucked down in a bowl of pine trees. And most mornings, I'm out there before sunrise with coffee in a thermos and a rod in my hand, listening to frogs and owls, and that little slap of water against the dock. You know what I mean, that kind of peace that makes you feel like your shoulders finally dropped for the first time all week. I bought this land 15 years ago, paid my taxes like a grown man, fixed my own fence, kept my head down, waved at folks in town, never bothered anybody. Then Willow Crest Estates showed up on the ridge above my valley. Brand new houses lined up like a catalog. A stone entrance. Sign manicured lawns. Security lights that washed the tree line at night. And along with the houses came the Willow Crest HOA, which I learned is basically a tiny government run by people who treat a clipboard like a crown. The first time I met their president, Kendra Shaw, it was 6:07 a.m., and I heard heels on my dock. Heels on my dock, like I'd accidentally built a runway to invite trouble. I turned around, and there she was. Perfect. Hair, perfect makeup, a crisp blouse, a clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. And behind her was this guy in an HOA polo, who looked nervous, like he already knew he was about to witness something ugly. Kendra smiled at me like we were on a house tour and said, "Good morning, I'm Kendra Shaw, HOA president. You can't fish here." And I actually laughed because my brain couldn't accept what my ears just heard. I said, "Ma'am, this is my dock. You're standing on private property." And she didn't blink. She just tilted her head, like I was the one confused, and said, "This lake is listed as a community amenity. Residents have access rights. We've had complaints. You're taking fish that belong to the neighborhood." The word neighborhood came out of her mouth like it meant something holy, like it outranked deeds and taxes and reality. I stared at her, then at the water, then back at her, and I said, "The neighborhood is up on that ridge, the lake is down here, and the lake is mine." And her smile tightened into something colder. She stepped closer and shoved a paper toward my chest. A big, bold notice of violation. Fine $600 infraction, unauthorized removal of HOA-managed wildlife. Pay within 72 hours to avoid further action. I'm not making this up. I stood there in my old flannel shirt, holding a fake fine, like it was a movie prop. And I said, "I'm not in your HOA, you can't fine me." And she leaned in and lowered her voice like she was giving me a lesson, and said, "People like you always think deeds matter more than community." And that line hit me like a slap, because I heard the contempt in it like she'd already decided I was a problem to manage, not a neighbor to respect. I handed her the paper back and said, "Kendra, leave my dock." and her eyes flashed just a quick spark of anger. Then she clicked back into that practiced smile. For the guy behind her turned on her heel and said, "This isn't over," like she was promising me a storm. And she kept that promise. Over the next couple weeks, the harassment started showing up in neat little packages, a neon sticker on my mailbox that said, "Notice, non-compliance." A letter zip-tied to my gate about unregistered watercraft activity. A printed email. Someone slid under my door, warning me that residents reported suspicious behavior near the lake, and every time I went into town for gas or groceries, I felt eyes on me. Not curious. Judgment. Eyes like I'd already been convicted in a group chat. I couldn't even see. I tried to brush it off. I really did, because I'm grown, and I've got work, and bills, and a life. But then came the first call to the cops, and that's when it stopped being annoying and started being dangerous. Saturday morning, I'm backing my John boat trailer down my own gravel road when a patrol SUV swings in and blocks me, and the deputy gets out with that hand-on-the-belt posture and says, "Sir, we got a call about an armed trespasser near the lake hands where I can see them." And my stomach dropped so hard, I swear I felt it in my boots. I moved slow, set my keys on the hood, and said, "Deputy, I'm on my property. I can show you the deed and survey in my truck." And while he's asking questions and patting me down like I'm a threat, I see Kendra's SUV behind the patrol car, with her window down, and her phone up already filming, and she tells him loud enough for me to hear. "That's him. He's been threatening residents," like she's narrating a true crime show. The deputy didn't arrest me that day. He looked at my documents and he backed off. But he said something that kept me awake that night. He said, "They're saying the lake is part of their community plan." And I lay in bed staring at my ceiling thinking, okay, so this isn't a misunderstanding. This is a story, and Kendra is writing it in real time. I'm not a fighter. I'm not a tough guy speech person. But I know one thing about stories. If you let someone else tell it long enough, folks start believing it. And then truth becomes an inconvenience. So, Sunday. I sat at my kitchen table with every document I had. Deed tax records, old survey map. Photos from when I bought the place. And Monday, I called my attorney. Raphael King, a real estate litigator, with a voice like gravel and a brain like a filing cabinet. He listened quiet for a minute and then said, "Miles, stop talking to them. Stop responding to notes. Photograph everything. And whatever you do, do not touch anything. They install on your land. You hear me? They want you to react." 2 days later, I drove to my north entrance and found my old chain cut and tossed in the ditch. And in its place was a brand new steel gate with a keypad lock, and bolted right to the center was a sign that read, "Willow Crest, HOA Private Access. Trespassers prosecuted." And I sat there in my truck, gripping the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles went white, because it's a special kind of violation to have somebody slap their name on your land, like a dog marking a tree. Every muscle in me wanted to cut the lock and drag the whole gate into the woods, but Raphael's words were in my head. Don't give them a story. So I took photos. Wide shots and close-ups. Timestamps, the cut chain. The new lock, the sign. Then I drove back home, and I felt something shift in me, like the part of my brain that still hoped this would calm down, finally shut off. I emailed everything to Raphael, and I said out loud to nobody, "Okay, paperwork warfare, it is." Raphael hired a licensed survey crew, and they showed up in bright vests and started marking the property line with flags. And I'm watching those flags go in, like they're little boundaries of sanity. And of course, Kendra shows up with 2 board members and a phone in her hand, talking loud and fast, performing for an invisible audience. "You're scaring residents," she snaps. "You can't mark HOA land," and the surveyor doesn't even look at her. He just says, calm as a priest, "Ma'am, you're standing on Mr. Bennett's parcel." For a split second, her face did this little glitch, like her brain caught on the edge of reality. Then she snapped back into anger and said, "We'll see what the court says," like the court is a magic wand you can wave when you don't like facts. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, exactly. More like my mind wouldn't stop. So I started digging county records. Old developer pages, archived listings. Anything I could get my hands on. And around 2 a.m., I found it. A glossy marketing brochure from the early Willow Crest sales push. And on page 3 was a sunset photo of my lake. My lake taken from the ridge with words like exclusive lake lifestyle and resident fishing privileges and private waterfront recreation. And I just sat there staring at it, feeling my anger turn cold, because that's when I understood the real game. They weren't just being nosy neighbors. They sold a dream they didn't legally own. They used my water as bait, and now Kendra wasn't trying to stop me from fishing because she hated fishermen. She was trying to stop me from existing because my existence threatened to expose a lie that helped sell those houses. I printed the brochure and took it to Raphael the next morning, and he stared at it and said, "Miles, this is fraud territory," and he pulled sales comps and showed me how the houses with lake access language sold at a premium compared to similar homes in the area. And suddenly, Kendra's desperation made sense, because if homeowners found out they paid extra for rights, they never had lawsuits would rain down like a storm. That should have been enough, honestly, but it got worse, because once you start pulling on a thread like that, you find more rot underneath. An older woman from town, Delia Marsh, who'd lived in this area long before Willow Crest was even a sketch on a napkin, told me something that made my stomach drop. She said, "After big rains, that hill smells like sewer. I always wondered where their runoff goes, and I laughed at first because it sounded too gross to be real." Then she looked at me and said, "Honey, I'm not joking." Raphael brought in an environmental consultant, and we did everything clean and documented samples taken after rain on my side of the line chain of custody photos dates, and the results came back ugly enough that the state environmental office agreed to take a look. That's when my emotions shifted again, because up until then, I'd been mostly offended and embarrassed. Like, why am I being bullied for living quietly on land I paid for? But once I realized my lake might be getting used as somebody's downhill dumping ground, that embarrassment turned into something sharper. Because it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my water, my land, my right to not have someone else's mess pushed onto me because they thought I was the quiet guy who'd never fight back. We set up cameras, not spy stuff, just trail cams on my gates and along the boundary where they kept creeping. And we posted no trespassing signs every 50 feet. And Raphael filed for emergency relief. And he also made a few calls of his own, the kind of calls attorneys make when they smell liability. Meanwhile, Willow Crest decided to throw a big summer kickoff at their clubhouse tents and catering, and a little band. And it happened right after a storm rolled through hard rain. Then clear skies. And by evening, the event was back in full swing until the smell hit. Even from my side of the trees, I caught it on the wind, sharp and sour, and I walked to my fence line and raised binoculars and I saw people backing away from the pool deck with napkins over their faces. A dark slick creeping out of a drain near the patio, spreading across the concrete like someone spilled oil. The band stopping mid-song, chairs scraping, and somebody actually bending over like they were about to throw up. Then Kendra stepped out holding a microphone, still smiling like she's about to give a speech on community values, until she saw what was happening, and her smile died, and her eyes snapped downhill toward me, not confused, not concerned, furious like her secret was leaking out in public. She rallied 2 security guys and the maintenance supervisor and marched down to my posted boundary like she was leading a charge. And when they reached my fence, the maintenance guy pulled out bolt cutters, and my camera later caught the exact moment Kendra waved her hand and said, "Cut it." And I remember watching it later and thinking, wow, she didn't even hesitate. She just stepped right over the line like laws were suggestions. I didn't run down there screaming. I didn't grab anything stupid. I just walked slow and steady, hands visible, heart beating like a drum. And when she saw me, she lit up like I'd walked into her trap. She raised her phone and said loud for the camera, "There he is, the reason families aren't safe." And I said, "Kendra, you're trespassing. Turn around and go back." And she snapped, "You sabotaged our drainage. You're endangering children if anything happens that's on you." And I nodded at my no trespassing sign and said, "Make sure you record the part where you ignored that," because she wanted me to explode. She wanted the dangerous man clip. And when I didn't give it to her, she turned her lie into an emergency. Right there in front of me, she dialed 911 and put on that trembling voice like she was auditioning for a role. "Please send officers immediately. There's a dangerous man on our property. He threatened us. I think he has a weapon." And I just stood there thinking, you know what I mean? There are moments in life where you can almost hear the door closing behind somebody, like they just crossed a line they can't uncross. Sirens hit the ridge in under 10 minutes, and Sheriff Don Wyatt arrived first, and right behind him came the county inspector and a state environmental officer, because Raphael had already alerted them, and they were already watching this mess. Kendra ran toward the sheriff like he belonged to her and shouted, "Arrest him! He threatened us!" And the sheriff looked at the cut fence, the posted signs, then at her and said flat, "Why are you on his side of the line?" And she tried to talk over him, pointing uphill, saying it's community property. But the inspector stepped forward and asked one simple question. "Whose drainage is backing up?" And Kendra, angry and careless, snapped, "Ours, the clubhouse drainage." And the environmental officer's eyes narrowed like a camera zooming in, and he said, "So, you're admitting your facility discharges downhill onto his parcel?" And Kendra froze, and I could see the moment she realized she'd just handed them a thread. I handed the sheriff my tablet and said, "Before anybody touches anybody, please watch this." And he watched footage of Kendra's people cutting my chain, installing that HOA gate, cutting my fence, stepping past my no trespassing signs. And then he turned the screen toward her and said, "Is that you?" And she went pale and whispered, "He can't film me." And the sheriff said, "He filmed his property. You invaded it." And the inspector held up a test strip from a sample taken near the runoff point, and it changed color so fast the crowd actually murmured, and suddenly all those residents who'd been told I was the threat were staring at Kendra like they'd never seen her before. She tried to pivot into a speech about safety and property values, but her words were collapsing in real time, and Sheriff Wyatt's tone turned official. Kendra Shaw, turn around, hands behind your back," and she laughed for half a second like it was impossible. Then the deputy stepped forward with cuffs, and the laugh broke into a gasp, and the metallic click echoed off the trees, and Kendra's phone slipped out of her hand and landed in the mud, still recording her downfall for the same neighbors she'd whipped into a frenzy. That should feel like the clean ending, right? Villain gets cuffed. Hero gets vindicated. Roll credits. But here's where it gets messy, because as they walked her toward the cruiser, she hissed at me. "You just made enemies out of an entire neighborhood." And up on that ridge, the residents gathered, staring down at the lake they paid extra to own. And some of them weren't angry at her. They were angry at me, like I owed them access, because they bought a lie. And that's the part people fight about, because justice doesn't always land gentle, and being right doesn't always make you popular. So here's my question for you, and I'm asking it for real. If you were me, do you forgive a whole neighborhood that fell for one person's story and treated you like a criminal on your own land? Or do you draw the hardest line you've ever drawn and keep that gate closed forever? No exceptions. Just for the kids, no community compromise. Then were those homeowners victims too, or were they willing participants because the lie benefited them until it didn't? And does that change what they deserve from me? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me where you stand and why. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA that acted like a private government. Tell me the wildest thing they tried to enforce, because I swear these stories sound fake until you live one. If you believe property rights should mean something, hit. Like if you want more real-life justice stories like this, subscribe. And I want you to argue it out down there respectfully. Who was truly wrong here? Who learned the right lesson? And what would you have done if you were standing in my boots with mud on your jeans and a fishing rod treated like a weapon?